there, students. This is part 2 of our transformation critique. So we are going to move on down to our last 4 students. Here is the first one for part 2 of our transformation critique. As a quick reminder, this was the aim. We start with an original object. In this case, it was a clothespin. We sketch that object and we model the object in modeling clay. We sketch a transformation and we model a transformation. We create an armature and then we add clay to that armature, and then we add more clay to that armature. So moving on to part 2. This student had as an original piece a heart, and so they sketched the heart and then they sketched the heart breaking. We have a model, I believe, of the heart. So here's the model of the heart in the non-hardening modeling clay. And then we have the heart that is sliced in 2. So it looks like it is done with the non-hardening modeling clay. And for week 2, we have the original heart and we have a model of the heart, and the slice in the middle has been made jagged. So what does that do to the heart? For the first heart, we've got a kind of clean slice. And for the second one, we have a jagged slice. And then for week 3, we have the original, we have the sketch, and we have, I think this is the modeled heart from a different position. So the zigzags have been made, the zigzag has been made in the center. And yeah, in terms of development, I think that there could be some smoothing around the edges, perhaps a little more roundness to the heart if that is something that you want, perhaps even more transformation, so that we might think of it standing up, and maybe it's 2 little sculptures, one for each of the pieces of the heart. And how does it change? Think about, how does this change from a heart to a broken heart? And is that enough of a transformation? So in all 3 photos of the modeled heart, I think it's lying down on the ground. So how is it lying down on the ground? Where is it positioned? Might be some interesting ways to develop this further. So moving on to student 7. Student 7 was another student who started with an image of a 3-dimensional object. And so this student had glasses, and I love the idea of it that snaps in half and then repositioned and they become scissors. I just, yeah, I love it. So the glasses just snap in half and turn into scissors, and they added, their illustration was a digital illustration, which I think works really, really nicely. When you use a photo of an object, it's a little bit different than, I have glasses right here. So I have these glasses and I can, let's put them close to me so they're in focus. I can move them around and see them in different angles. And that can really help me kind of understand how they work. And I actually have glasses that are broken And so that's why I was laughing about the snapped glasses. There is a use for when your glasses break. So continuing on week 1, we have this model of the original object and from another angle. I really thought this was fantastic. We see a lot of craftsmanship. Let's see, I'll make it much bigger. Oops, now it's behind things. There. So we can see that the artist has bulked up the glasses just enough for them to be firm enough to keep their shape. But they still look, they still feel like glasses, like they're not so bulky that they're overwhelming. And the connections between the big pieces. So I imagine that the artist would have broken it down to a circle, 2 circles, 2 coils, and then a little connector piece in the middle, right? And then the connections between those pieces are quite thoughtfully done. Really, really nice. And this is the non-hardening modeling clay, I believe, because of the look and the color. I order the gray clay for you all for the non-hardening modeling clay, and the red clay for the Sculpey. And then we have these scissors. And so we have the lenses from the glasses, and then we have the coils that have been sharpened. And the craftsmanship is, oh, and this little connector piece in the middle. Look at that. So really a very, very real attention to the original form. That's what I see, some real attention to the original form, and almost how little can the artist do to completely change the object. So the original forms are still there. I mean, they're just still there. That's very, very interesting. And that's all in week 1. So the artist figured out a lot in week 1. And then for week 2, we have the, let's see, let me see what he said. Clay was really hard to use, soft, making it stand up was difficult. Putting the foil worked well, but difficult putting the foil on as well. So putting the foil on, I'm not sure if the artist was putting the foil on top of the clay or if it was inside. Sometimes that's where using words can be pretty difficult. Big success was keeping everything together. It fell apart a couple times, but in the end it worked out just fine. Challenge was making the shape for it, as well as keeping the legs of the glasses together. And here's what's interesting is that we're back to the glasses. So the original form, I think, was glasses, and then we moved to scissors, and then we went back to glasses. I actually find this floppy glasses to be quite interesting. But I think that the way this clay works was pretty tricky for the artist. So it worked well for these long forms to maintain their shape, not into the future because it gets all oily and droopy with heat and cold and stuff like that. But then I think that probably before this went into the oven, the artist probably had a pretty good sense of how it was working. And then it was probably really hard to keep it in one piece. I can't tell if there is aluminum foil underneath. That's something that is not totally clear from the photo. Let's see if I make it bigger, if I can tell. Yeah, it's hard to tell. It seems like there might not be foil inside the clay because it is so clean. It's really hard to wrap the clay around aluminum foil and have the sculpture so clean. So there might have been a misunderstanding there, but if it was, then what a huge, enormous challenge to get this to work with the aluminum foil not being used to hold things together. So in a way, it's kind of like you gave yourself twice the challenge. So really interesting. I think that's what happens with this project is you transform from one to the next, and you realize often at the end of the transformation, you think, oh, where did I start? And sometimes you're right back where you started, which is kind of interesting. So this is student 8. And for student 8, we have a top hat. And we also have some weeks that are, well, the first week, we've got the top hat. And then on week 2 or 3, it's a completely different form. So week 1, we've got the top hat. We've got the sketch. We've got a sketch of a transformation. And we have here, my favorite, Cheez-Its box. So helpful to have Cheez-It box around because they are so versatile. Between Cheez-Its boxes and clothespins, my students are usually like, Francie, give it a rest. Okay, so I think it looks like the bottom part is a slab that was flattened against the Cheez-Its box. The sides might have also been slabs that then kind of were formed round, and then the top, kind of hard to put that top on. So I bet this was tricky to make, and you can kind of tell from the outcome. It's a little bit tricky to make. It doesn't have the a clean, crisp feeling like this photo of a hat does. And again, we've got someone who's using a photo of an object instead of an object that you can feel in your hands. But it's very possible that the artist had some hat that they had that they were looking at as well. We just don't know about it. So what I would advise is to kind of, we've got one slab for the bottom, one slab for the top, and then we could make a longer slab for the round piece. So what I would do is create the slab on the bottom and then kind of guesstimate how big would the top be. And I would, I might make a slab that was about the size that I wanted it to be. And I would make a longer slab or a few long slabs and then cut them down to size and wrap them where I want them to be on the base of the hat, the brim of the hat. I might even prop the hat up in certain ways with certain things, the rim of the hat, the brim, I think it's called brim of the hat in certain ways so that it had that feeling. And then kind of attach it probably with some sort of tool like a skewer. I can use a skewer for everything, or a skewer taped to a pencil, that kind of thing. Attach it to the base and then turn it over if it's possible, turn it over and trace where you need to cut out the top slab of the hat and then attach that probably with the use of a tool. The smaller it is, I mean, if it was about half this size, then it probably would have been a little easier. A full-sized hat would be really, really hard because the clay is really floppy. Okay, I've talked through that enough. But that's kind of the way I figure things out. So here is the transformation. And I think you can see that you know what, let me bring the sketch over to here as well. Might not use it for all the times, but so I've got this sketch and I've got the original. So we've got the top of the hat and the bottom and the middle. And so we've got these 3 slabs, just like I said in the beginning, I was saying I would have 3 slabs, right? So we've got the top of it, and then we've got the bottom and the middle. And the bottom and the middle are like the edges are curled in. Really interesting. So you've got a hollowness to the inside. I really like where the sketch was going, and I think the outcome is really quite successful. I can also see that some skills are being built. We've got a bit more clean surfaces. You can't feel the smudge of the fingers quite as much as you can in this. If it was, if the student meant to have kind of that earthy, smudgy feel of the fingers, then great, but I don't think they did. So I think there's just a lot of development shown here. I would definitely, for photos, take it off. As enthusiastic as I am about the versatility of Cheez-Its boxes, I would put it in a location where there was less, it's very busy. So it's hard to look just at what you're doing. And then for week 2, I was trying to think how this related, and it was hard to figure out how it related. So this is the last group of images for this sculpture, and it is as though the sculpture has completely changed, almost as though it has a different beginning object. Let me see what the artist said. Transformation pretty fun. Able to sculpt an armature, make a layer of clay over the armature, made it a little bit easy for me to sculpt and soften out my clay. So the armature, sometimes for people, the armature makes it harder. And in this case, it made it easier. So that's a success in itself. Success, being able to make the sculpture look how I wanted without the assistance, with the assistance of the armature. The challenge I had was, at first, was getting into the tight spots of the armature, but I got there using a tool. Really, really good. So I'm not sure what the beginning object was. However, I'm going to assume that it is a hat, and it is as though we've got the brim of the hat at the bottom, and then the hat gets much, much taller and grows arms. So that's a huge transformation, and one that I would totally buy it if the student told me that's what it was in class, which often this happens. I might ask a student, oh, so how does this relate to the first image? And the student might make it up on the spot, or say, I didn't think about it, and we think about it together and think about how, okay, we've got the brim of the hat, and then the hat grows way tall, and then we add arms, because maybe the arms are the ribbon around the hat. That's fine. Sometimes you have to remake the story to have it make sense with the ending, and that's totally okay with me. I see enormous success here. I mean, just look at the development from quite a, it's really messy at the beginning. So I can tell that you gave yourself a challenge. That's great. And then the second photo, we see skills building. And then the last photo, we see that it's completely different. I mean, not completely different. We can still, I can still tell it's the same person because of the Cheez-Its box, right? No, seriously, it's a really interesting sculpture. It feels like a cactus. It feels like a person. Feels like a number of different things. We would not immediately say top hat, but I think it's very interesting. It is not made in Sculpey. So that's the one thing that I would definitely, it's not a finished product per se. But that's not about, I'm not talking about grading per se. I hate that phrase. I'm not talking about grading really in these videos. So we've got this one. This is the last student that we'll talk about today. This is student 9. This student, thank you for using a clothespin. these beautiful clothespins. Okay, so we've got the original object, we've got the sketch of the original object, and we have a model of the original object. It looks like this artist has some white clay. I can't totally tell if it's modeling clay or Sculpey. Sometimes I can. In this case, I can't. I would guess that it's Sculpey. So we've got the sketch and we've got the the transformation sketch. Okay. And I would think that this is a model. So this has some really effective things on it. And depending on what kind of clay it is, or just what you say to me, or, I would take this as the final project. So we'll think of it as though it is the final project. I don't know that there's an armature underneath. I don't think, doesn't look like it's big enough to need an armature. And it would be very hard to use an armature for something tiny with, doesn't look like it has an armature. So we've got the sketch and we've got either the model or the final thing, not sure. And so the two pieces of the clothespin are taken apart and lying kind of crisscrossed on each other. Then we've got flowers that are sitting on top, and we've got this little bitty coil that, to me, oops, move over. This seems very much like the wire that keeps the clothespin together. And I think that this model or final project, whatever it is, this transformation shows quite a bit of skill. I think probably the student was able to just take apart, nothing's quite working the way I want it to. It's probably able to just take apart these pieces and crisscross them on top of each other, and then make the little roses and add the twisty coil. This coil is very, very slender and delicate. And the roses, I mean, could there be things to be added to this? Absolutely. The way the artist made it, they don't necessarily have to be added, because I think everything feels as though it's part of a unified form. So there could be more crispness, there could be more delicacy, or something like that. But we've got this delicate little coil, and since it's so kind of perfect, our eyes notice its delicacy. And the contrast of the cracked edges of the rose, that contrast kind of gives our eye interesting things to look at. And then the way the clothespin is formed is a much more kind of, it almost feels as though it was sawed. It's just a different, it's like it's been constructed totally differently, even though it's the same material. So there's a lot of diversity in terms of the way different parts were made. Very interesting. And that's all in week 1. So that is your transformation critique video. And thank you for watching. I really want to encourage you all on your journeys as artists. And I think that hearing kind of dialogue about your art is really important. So I hope you enjoyed this, learned from it, and I'll see you in the next video if I have time to do that next video. Take care.